This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.
Welcome, everybody, to PRC ITP. I'm going to get this rolling. I think this is good. That's got to be how we're going to abbreviate the show moving forward. Now, Pallet, Rack City, Inside the Paint, Clay Ferraro here, Ira Winderman there, where we talk about the best team in the NBA by record, tied.
Crazy.
The Miami Heat. It is crazy, and I think especially given the schedule that they've played. And Ira, we're going to talk about this as the show rolls on, but you look at the point differential, and it is astounding what the Heat are doing right now. And it's not like they played a bunch of cupcakes along the way. I mean, this has been, and they got a much more daunting schedule coming up. Like, it's not going to get easier over the next couple of weeks. And yet, when you look at what they've been able to do to the best teams in the NBA, it's pretty impressive, Ira. So just quick broadly here. And by the way, we love keeping this interactive. Please drop your questions, your comments into the chat section. We'll get it. Smash the like button for us. Does us a huge favor when you do that. But Ira, just broadly, what's been your takeaway during this great start for the Heat so far?
You know, Clay, one of the most interesting things is usually when you cover a team, you have to remember the next morning or afternoon to wake up and see the last 2-minute report, see what calls were right or what were wrong. That's only when the game is within 5 points in the last 2 minutes. The Heat have had one last 2-minute report to the public this season, the overtime loss in Indiana. Everything else has been a blowout. There hasn't been a game where we've wondered about the new NBA rule about that out of bounds can only be a coach's challenge, is not a referee review anymore. So from my standpoint, not having to go to the last 2-minute report makes you realize that everything has been lopsided. And again, sort of, the inside sauce of what I do, it's a lot easier to write a game story when you know who's going to win and it's early in the fourth quarter and you can sort of sit down and do that. That makes it easier. I think this team realizes there were questions about it at the start of the season. There were doubts. Milwaukee and Brooklyn and everyone talking about other teams. Are the Heat going to have home court? They wanted to make a statement. But I think it's what Bam Adebayo's been telling us. There are so many dogs on this team that they not only want to win the next game, but they want to win the next quarter, and they want to win the next possession, and that everything matters to them. And they want to be able to celebrate individual moments as well as overall victories, and you see it in them, and that's how they're wired. You see Kyle Lowry getting a technical foul of 15 points because he truly believes the last call was wrong. Or Jimmy Butler giving the death glare when he doesn't get a foul call and sending him to the foul line, even though he's going more than any other NBA player. That's how these guys are. Every moment to them matters. So you might ask the question of this, Clay, can you do that in an 82-game, 5-6 month season, or will you burn out? I don't think these guys will. I think these guys, the next loss for the Heat, to them will be a crushing loss. And you can't tell them, hey, you're 6-2. You guys are doing fine. They won't want to hear that. They'll want to get back to grinding. It's simply who they are. Some players fit that. Some players don't. The one thing I'm really curious about is, does Victor Oladipo fit that? He sent out a tweet after the last game saying, man, we good. And that's fine. But would you be all in with this? Because right now, the top 8-9 guys in this rotation, including a guy like Dwayne Dedmon and his lunch pail approach, are all in. I think the Heat, if they make personnel moves, if they make changes, you're going to have that mentality. They don't want any cruisers, even if they're highly talented.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing when you ask about can they sustain this over an 82-game schedule, it's not that there's something out of character to sustain. Like, I mean, you are who you are, right? I mean, it's different than saying, okay, let's say Kyle Lowry, say it was the flip side where, he started off so poorly shooting the ball. Right. Let's say that he had started off shooting 65% from three-point range. Then you can ask the question, is that sustainable? And the answer is no, because throughout the course of his career, that's not been who he is. When you're asking, can they sustain this level of intensity? Yeah, because all of these guys that you mentioned, they are that intense by their nature, by the work that they've put in. So I think the thing that stands out to me is, and I just had a look at the schedule here, it's crazy that they've done this while taking on Milwaukee and Brooklyn and going on the road and playing another really good team in Dallas. A game, by the way, that you and I had kind of marked as a schedule loss in Memphis with Bam out. And I
Yeah.
think you and I kind of wondered if they were going to sit Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry on the second night of a
The older
back-to-back.
players, yeah.
Blew out Charlotte, who has been the chic en vogue team to that point in the Eastern Conference. So it's not like they're going out there and their point differential is over 16 points a game. The only other team that's double digits right now is Utah, and that's in the Western Conference. So, Ira, I think what's really impressive to me is the two things that you mentioned, the fact that they are this level of intense every day. It's not going to leave them. And secondly, that they're blowing out teams the way they are. I will say, the thing that I would say, Ira, really quickly, that would, if you look at the one game they lost, it's not a coincidence. It was because Kyle Lowry was not there. So
yeah, but you know what, Clay? I'm going to interrupt you here for this reason. You listed, a bunch of really good teams, except Milwaukee was without Drew Holiday.
fair.
You look at that game. Orlando was without Jonathan Isaac. You look at that game. Brooklyn was without, I know they're always without Kyrie Irving, but they were without Kyrie Irving. Memphis without DeAndre Melton. Dallas without Kristaps Porzingis and Maxi Kleber. Yes, I know that Kyle Lowry missed a Heat game. I know that Bam Adebayo missed a game. But that's part of it also, is getting teams at the right time also. I don't think the Heat have played any team at full strength this season, because even Indiana, the game they lost, they were without Karis LeVert. The Pacers, they were without TJ Warren. Maybe in this COVID world, in this quick restart between seasons, that's the way life is going to be anyway in the NBA. 2 of their next 7 games are against the Jazz. So that could be interesting. That could be telling. FTX Arena, Saturday at 7:30 this weekend. 1 week later, I believe 5 o'clock start for European viewers for the timing over there, playing in Utah at Vivint Arena. So there will be some clear benchmarks and, to look at this team now. Again, like I was talking to Big O about the upcoming trip. You end the homestand now, 2-game homestand with Utah on Saturday, but then you have the Nuggets, you have the Lakers, you have the Clippers, you have the Jazz. So I think in 2 weeks, we could be sitting here going, man, the Heat are like the Dolphins. You just don't know until you get through the roughest ones. But there has been nothing to indicate that they can't compete with anyone at this point.
Getting some of your comments here. And by the way, thank you. Any questions, any comments you have, drop them in the chat. Good morning, Mr. Spock. Thomas Jensen, thank you so much for the kind words. Johan, good morning. You have a team that grinds and has that hard-nosed mentality. Chemistry looks really good. Hawaiian Punch makes a good point here that I wanted to get to. With the new rules making the game flow better and more watchable, how much does it help the veteran defensive teams like the Miami Heat? I think what it does, and Ari, you can kind of expand on this, I think it's also more that you have other teams who are having to adjust more than the Heat are. And it's a lot of what the Heat typically do, the fouls that Jimmy Butler typically draws, they're during the course of going to the basket and attacking the rim, as opposed to trying to draw contact for the sake of drawing contact.
Yes.
And it would have been different had you been relying on someone like Goran Dragic, who, hey, give him credit for how he played the game and how he worked within the rules. But a lot of times he would draw contact for the sake of drawing contact. You're seeing guys like James Harden, who early in the season, he's starting to hit his stride a little bit, but he was struggling with how to deal with that. Guys like Trae Young, Devin Booker, guys who have drawn contact for the sake of drawing. So I think when you have that veteran defensive team like the Heat, it's more that their toughness and being able to pursue defensively no longer works against them when you have guys trying to trick them.
Yeah, there's 2 elements there. I mean, Jimmy doesn't flail. He goes with force. I just posted a story at sunsentinel.com about that. Those are real, and they're spectacular. His fouls, the ones that he gets. The thing is, defensively, and you've heard this about the Heat when they first started with Pat Riley as coach, and even when Pat coached the Knicks, there was always a thought of, if you foul so much, the referees are going to sort of get tired of blowing the whistle, and they're going to let you play a little when you're physical all the time. That was a very real maxim people talked about the Knicks when Riley was there. I think because there's a crackdown on one certain type of foul, I think there's been a general reduction of calling fouls overall. This is one of the lowest free throw rates in the NBA in decades because of that. So you're right, Clay. When you're physical, when you're manning up on someone, the 50-50 ticky-tack call, the NBA is saying, wait a minute, we changed the rules to eliminate something different, but to eliminate the ticky-tack, let's let him play on. I love it. The games are shorter. There's fewer free throws. There's still guys like Jimmy Butler who get to the line. Giannis is still getting to the line. Embiid is getting to the line. Rudy Gobert are getting to the line, but not as many perimeter players. And you were perfect in mentioning Goran Dragic, who all those 4-point plays. He would shoot the three. Right. I mean, an average human being has 4 limbs, and yet it seemed like Goran had 8 limbs going in so many different directions. It must be a Slovenian thing that he would get those 4-point opportunities. I like it this way. Fewer whistles, I am fine with it. If the players are going to deal with bumps and bruises after, hey, it's not my bumps or bruises, I'm fine with that also.
Can I tell you the thing that I think is also really impressive about this Heat team? And look, we're not trying to be homers here, right? But I think you have to be objective in your analysis. When a team is playing as well as they are, there's not a whole lot to nitpick here. So I would say the thing that has struck me to this point is that they can beat you so many different ways right now. And, a team that was really poor rebounding the basketball last year, especially in the playoffs, and they got blown off the floor by Milwaukee in that respect. And I think they clearly prioritize that heading into the season. It's working. And it's a team that's going out there. If they're not hitting their threes, fine. They're going to attack the glass. If you score on one end, fine. We're still going to run on you. And we're still going to make you defend. And it doesn't feel, Ira, and again, this gets back to your point about these guys, this is who they are. It doesn't feel like as the course of the game goes on that there's any time where they take the foot off the gas. Like this is their identity. This is who and yes, you're gonna hit some rough patches along. This is 82 games. Like it's not gonna be all sunshine and rainbows. And yet I think ultimately, because they can win multiple different ways, and because the fabric of who they are is to be this tough-nosed team and ultimately grind out victories, they're going to be able to navigate those sorts of things. And get back to what you were saying before the season all started. I've been the whole time like, all right, I don't care where they finish seeding-wise, but if you can grind out games even when you're not playing well, it makes you more likely to finish in that top 3 than you would if you were a veteran team that kind of giving guys rest days along the way.
Yeah, they're winning regular season games, playing playoff style basketball, and Clay.
That's a great way to put it. That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
So heartening because so many teams we see. How many times have you heard this when you're doing reporting? You're doing your half-hour pregame shows with Will. You talk about, okay, but when this team gets to the playoffs, they're going to be that. When the Heat get to the playoffs, they're going to be that. You know what? When the Heat get to the playoffs, they're going to be this. Because they're playing playoff basketball in the regular season. There will be no adjustment. There will be no, well, we have to avoid the play-in because we need the full week of pre-playoff camp. We need to head out, go to Lynn University or something and find ourselves. They are who they are. They're playing tough SOB basketball in October and November. So come April and May, their identity will be in place. It won't be like, who's the closer for Philadelphia? What's it going to be like with Kyrie Irving back for the Nets and how they're going to change? It's going to be the same. If they can hold it together, if they can stay healthy, if they can avoid COVID, it's going to be the same in game 1 at the start of the regular season as game maybe they're hoping 28 of the playoffs.
And we love the fact that they're blowing out teams by 17 because I know like you get to start writing your stories.
And you're pulling only first half clips there for your sports shows because the game's over. Yeah. I mean, you'll leave out the yurt saving stuff, but at least you'll get it done.
God, you read my mind. I was just about to say, with all due respect to Omer Yurtseven, I'd rather run.
Hey, at least he gets to play now, and UD gets to play, so there's some benefit there also.
Now, there is a part of me that's curious and eager to see what happens in a tight game late when Kyle Lowry's on the floor. Because like you said, the only tight game they've had was that game against Indiana, and Lowry didn't play. And they really kind of ran out of answers in that game. And, it was one game, but I want to see how they bounce back from that. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, I want to get to what Ira talked about with Victor Oladipo. And he's clearly excited about what this team is doing right now, but how does he fit into this puzzle moving forward? I want to talk more about Tyler Hero and his start. We got a lot to get to right here on PRC ITP. We'll be right back.
Reach out to Ira and Clay. Drop them an email at insidethepaint@yahoo.com. Chime in on the YouTube chat board. You're listening to the Pallet Rack City Inside the Paint Show. When you need your warehouse looking good while staying efficient, there's only one place to find the finest racks in the business. Pallet Rack City in Hialeah. 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. Pallet Rack City is the company you need when you want your warehouse sporting the finest racks in the business. After all, who doesn't love a great rack? Pallet Rack City. 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. Sports fans love a place with great food, cold drinks, and TVs everywhere. That's why sports fans love Sports Grill and their 7 amazing locations. Check out the Bird Road location at 11481 Southwest 40th Street in the back corner of the West Bird Shopping Center. Sports Grill is also now offering some great employment opportunities. All kinds of positions are now available from kitchen to hosting. Call for more information at 305-485-8845. From wraps to salads to amazingly delicious specialty dishes, Sports Grill is the home to the legendary special grilled wings. Since 1987, Sports Grill, good food, good drink, and good friends.
There's no need to drive around South Florida wasting valuable time looking for a new or certified pre-owned Acura. Go to the #1 volume sales dealership in the Southeast United States. Craig Zinn's Acura of Pembroke Pines. Purchase with pace and space in a dealership tailored to your needs. From home buying to providing that personal touch. Contact the 2020 Satisfaction Award winner Craig Zinn's Acura of Pembroke Pines. 888-776-5123. That's 888-776-5123. Or visit them at 15601 Pines Boulevard in Pembroke Pines. If you're a Miami sports fan, then there's only one store to go to, and that's Caneswear at Miami Fanwear in Davie. They're your one-stop shop for all your inner Miami CF, Canes, Dolphins, Panthers, and Marlins merchandise. They have hats, t-shirts, game day jerseys, and so much more. Located at 2511 South University Drive in Davie, and open 24/7 online at caneswear.com or innermiamiwear.com. Call them at 954-835-5597. Caneswear, the spot where inner Miami and all Miami sports fans shop.
When you're ready to purchase a new home loan or refinance the one you have, American Dream Lending will make sure your loan experience is easy with fast approvals and quick closings. With many loan programs and competitive rates, now is the time to turn your dreams into reality. Ask about special financing for veterans. They never charge an application fee and you will work directly with one of their experienced loan professionals. Stop dreaming and contact American Dream Lending today, 786-802-1727 or online at adreamlending.com. Welcome back to the Pallet Rack City Inside the Paint program with Ira Winderman and Clay Ferraro. Let's get back to the guys that just updated their email from Prodigy to AOL. Here's Ira and Clay.
Get off our lawn. We still got our AOL email addresses, and we're proud of it. Clay Ferraro here, Ira Winderman there. Some good stuff in the first block of the show. Let's talk about, let's get some of your questions here. C-Dog says, you ready to say top 3 seed for this Heat team? I am. And Ira, I think the reason why, and obviously you have to add the asterisk, the caveat, what have you, if they stay healthy and all that, reasonably healthy. But what I think has been impressive to me is kind of what we talked about in the first segment, is that they can beat you in so many different ways that, like, I'm not concerned that on a night when nobody is shooting the ball well. And by the way, I mean, Duncan Robinson and Kyle Lowry were horrible shooting the ball to start the season. And Kyle basically, we had to bleep him on the late newscast, but he said, I told Duncan Robinson that, hey, yes, they're paying us for nothing because we can't make what.
I was there in Memphis when he was saying it, and I always wonder about the Heat post game that does the quick turnaround on those interviews, and I'm like, I wonder if they caught that or not.
They did not. It actually aired on Valley Sports, and poor Will had to say, yeah, we apologize for Kyle Larson.
I mean, that's the thing, and that's what we talked about. These guys are dogs, and they're raw. Yes. Now, yes, I can change words. I can put a asterisk, or something like that after it, so I don't have to use all the words. But this is who they are. I mean, Mark Keefe, my God, that guy's gutter mouth. It's like, you sort of got to, but that's how he plays also. So there's nothing phony there. There's no airs about this team. I don't think there's a real arrogance about this team of where they are. And like you mentioned, it's interesting how you say, can they be a top 3 seed? Because I still think Milwaukee has the depth of talent. I still think Kyrie comes back, or a Kyrie replacement comes back at some point. New mayor in New York. The rules could change as soon as January 1st, which is still before the midpoint of the season for Brooklyn to get their footing. You and I were talking about the number 3 in the East, Philadelphia, which I really question now. Joel Embiid's hurt again. Tobias Harris, of course, is in protocols. We still don't know what the heck is going on with Ben Simmons. But not only might not he be playable for them, he might not be tradable for them. So you have that. I was high on the Boston bandwagon. Then I saw Boston play. And then I heard Marcus Smart talk. I'm not sure anymore. So, and Atlanta, we've seen be very uneven. The young players that they are going to be uneven. So I think 3 is a good number. If you would have said, can they be a top 2 seed or the number 1 seed, I'd say hold your horses a little, Clay. We're a little bit early. But yeah, I think they've shown that they could be up there if they stay healthy.
Yeah, and it's not that they can't get into the top 2. It's that based on what we've seen so far, you're comfortable with the idea that they can get into that top 3. And something to your point about Boston, what I found interesting was, I think it was Woj last night said that they had a players only meeting already. I mean, it's early November, and then apparently not a whole lot came out of it. That apparently not a whole lot was like when you have a players only meeting and you come out of it as though there were no meeting. That's usually not a good sign. Now, with that said, it's going to be a desperate team that the Heat are going to have to face. A desperate Boston team.
You know what? They're getting them on a back-to-back. They played last night in Orlando. Yep. They celebrated the win over Orlando. Everyone beats Orlando. Orlando's going to be right there in the race for worst team in the NBA. So if that got Boston feeling good about themselves, then God bless everyone. Boston gets their win. The Heat gets a team that maybe is exhaling a little bit tonight. You know, it's sort of a win-win situation. You don't prove yourselves against Orlando. Look at you and I in the first segment. We were talking about the Heat quality wins. Neither of us went to that Orlando game. That was a schedule win that you have to win. You have to beat the Detroits. You have to beat the Orlandos. They have to beat the Timberwolves and the Sacramentos. The losses the Heat have sustained in recent years, but those are the ones you have to push past. Not too many gimmies in today's NBA, but Orlando is one.
Yeah, although to your point, Ira, I mean, those schedule wins, that's kind of tripped them up at times.
Oh, absolutely, and it can't. That's going to give a real definition of if they are who we think they are. Their next West Coast trip, for example, we mentioned the gauntlet of the Nuggets and the Lakers and the Clippers and the Jazz, but it ends against the Thunder. You can't have a misstep at the end of that trip because you're tired, because it's your 9th day on the road, because it's your 5th game. That's a test also of the character and who you are as well.
And to your point, Sean, our producer, does a great job. He actually has the schedule coming up. Sean, if you don't mind bringing that up really quickly. Wow, look how quick he was on that. Can you zoom in on that a little bit, Sean, please? And this is kind of what's coming up. You got Boston coming up tonight. The Utah game, which you mentioned, Ira, they play them twice within what, a 9-day
span, yeah.
7-game span. I mean, that's a real... the players hate it when you say measuring stick game, but when you're playing the only other team in the NBA that has a plus point differential of double digits, at least it's the type of game where you can see, all right, where do we stand against the other so-called best team in the league at this point? And then you got that West Coast
and the thing is, and Bam has struggled against bigger centers. So it's the Goberts and it's the Jokic's and it's the Embiids that have been a problem. So that will be a challenge for Bam because maybe a little more Dwayne Dedmon in those situations. But the bigger guys, that's where Bam sort of, as a tweener center, has struggled to a degree.
And Bam's got that extra size now. So let's see if that translates. Let's see if that helps him to be able to battle with those guys.
They still haven't stretched him. They haven't put him on the rack. So, he's still going to be 6'9", whether there's muscles, on his pecs and his biceps and everywhere else. So that's the thing. There still is some of that over-the-top-ism that you can't get away with. And remember, you're also starting a 6'4" power forward in PJ Tucker.
And so then you've got that 4-game road trip out west where you're taking on again Utah and Denver and then both LA squads, and then you get what should be a bit of a breather against Oklahoma City, which is easy for us to say, but then you still got to play the game. But you're really going to see this team even further tested over the next couple of weeks, which I think is good.
Absolutely.
You mentioned PJ Tucker, and we got a really good comment here. You go back and find it because somebody mentioned it and it hit me. Thomas says Tucker and Lowry shooting threes have opened the lanes up tremendously, and Tucker just kind of plants himself in the corner and just says, "Hey, C-Dollop, I feel like PJ has fit in that Jay Crowder role perfectly." And what I think that's a good comparison, and I think Tucker kind of takes it to a new level. And I love what Jay Crowder did with this team. I think with Tucker, Crowder was great. With Tucker, there's not that inconsistency. Like, you're not going to expect him to hit the wing three. That's a little too far away for him.
Right.
But you give him that corner three and it's over. And so there's...
And also, he doesn't take as many shots as Jay Crowder. So
right.
You're not going to have the fluctuations because he's still going to be a 5-shot-a-game guy. Enough of a threat, but he knows, let Bam, let Tyler, let Jimmy, let Kyle take the majority shots. Jay Crowder wanted to get his. He felt he was a part of the perimeter offense also. PJ Tucker has no illusions. He wants to defend. He wants to rebound. He wants to block out. And then if he gets his shots, he's happy. You don't have to feed the beast when it comes to his play.
Yeah, and with Crowder, they needed it. I mean, that particular team needed what he brought. You could tell, I mean, especially early in games, he was such a key, vital role for what they were doing. With Tucker, the identity of this team is a little bit different. To your point, they're not relying on him to do that, and he's perfectly content to let the rest of the guys do what they're doing. So they're really going to be tested. We're going to find out a lot more. Somebody made a comment here about the Heat. Jay says the Heat reminds me of the Knicks championship teams. Now, are you going back to like the late 60s, early 70s, or are we talking about the teams that won the team that won the Eastern Conference championship, the 94 squad, I think, that lost to Houston? But I've thought about this before, Ira, that this team feels like in many ways it's kind of built in the image of the Pat Riley Knicks teams that had that toughness. And yet I think there's also a little bit of an element of that 2006 Miami Heat championship team where you're bringing in some of these veterans that either have championship experience or close to it. And you're able to kind of, guys like that dog mentality. You had somebody like Gary Payton on that team who in big moments in the fight, I mean, he stepped up. So like you're bringing in those sorts of players to complement what's already your identity.
What, Clay, I'm going to give you comparisons to all three. If they're talking about the older Knicks, the Knicks of the 1970 or so, I think there's a lot. You could look at that Knicks team of DeBusschere and Bradley and Willis Reed, Frazier. I go with Dick Barnett. Then Earl Monroe came in. They moved the ball. It was almost sublime the way they moved the ball. And you've seen this. You've seen the YouTube highlights and the Twitter highlights of the 6, 7, 8 pass Heat possessions that leads to the perfect shot. So they do remind me of that Knicks team.
And not to interrupt you, but Jay clarified. He put down Kyle Lowry as Clyde Frazier, Jimmy Butler as Earl the Pearl, Duncan Robinson, Bill Bradley. So he actually. I don't know if Duncan Robinson's a future senator. Remember, Jimmy said Duncan Robinson has no IQ, so I don't know if he's the Rhodes Scholar that Bill Bradley was. But then you look at the next Knicks team, and you could say, the Anthony Masons, the Oakleys, the physical type. You have that right now with the Heat, also with the Dedmons and the Tuckers and that physical type of play. And then your point is very strong about the 2006 Heat team where they said, okay, we have our anchors, but we need the pieces to be part of that. That's when they made the big trade with Memphis and they brought in Jason Williams. Yes.
They brought in Antoine Walker. They brought in James Posey. They signed Gary Payton at the end of the preseason, at the end of free agency. So they augmented also. And that's what the Heat did this year with the subtle moves of a $7 million contract to a PJ Tucker, bringing back Dwayne Dedmon on that minimum scale, bringing in Markieff Morris on that minimum scale. They plugged the right pieces in. It goes to what we said at the top of the show today on Pallet Rack City Inside the Paint, is that the way that the Heat have built themselves is there is this type of player that they want. And if you fit in here into this box, you're part of us. All those players do. The question is whether Victor Oladipo will. The question was whether Akazi Okpala will. And apparently he won't, and now he's injured again. So you sort of are what you are now. Even Max Strus adopted a little more of that tough guy mentality, bulked up his body, has that thick build that he's able to at least put a body on you also. So he worked in there, and he sort of solidified his ninth man role until this injury right now.
By the way, though, thankful that it wasn't worse. I mean, that looked bad, and I found it interesting. And Ira, you're going to have to refresh my memory on which game it was. I don't know if it was the Memphis game, whatever game it was, where Duncan was really struggling, and Max Strus got all of his fourth quarter minutes, and it felt like, I don't want to say a message from Eric Spoelstra, but I think it was one of those where it was like, look, man, if Duncan's not doing what we got him to do, and he's not hitting, we're really confident that.
I think it was the Charlotte home game, the Friday before they began.
Yes, it was the Charlotte. You're right.
And that's what they're missing right now. The good thing is Duncan came around a little bit in the Dallas game to show a little bit more, and he certainly came around in the Memphis game also. But you don't have that guy off the bench, to be the 3-point specialist. We know Tyler is thriving in the mid-range, 60% shooting on his mid-range shots. But that extra 3-point threat, it puts the onus on other players. It's really weird to talk about the Strus injury and to say being out multiple weeks is good, but we know when he had the ACL playing for the Bulls D-League team, he missed an entire calendar year, so it could be worse. We wondered how are they going to fill things in. Matter of fact, Clay, I wanted to bring this up. I'm sorry if I'm taking you too tangential here.
No.
Eric Spoelstra, we were talking to after practice in Dallas at the American Airlines Center on Monday, and we asked him, well, who's going to step in for Max right now? And he says, well, we have Gabe we can go to, and we certainly like what Caleb Martin's doing. And I double-checked my quote with another of the beat writers, Anthony Chang from the Miami Herald, and I'm saying, did I miss something, or did he not mention Casey Okpala? This was before Casey was injured. And Anthony goes to me, no, those are the names he mentioned, which talks about how a guy has fallen so far from the consciousness that if you were to line up three guys going into the season and saying, if Max Strus becomes ninth man, who knew, and he gets injured, which one of these guys do you think might step in first? Casey Okpala, Caleb Martin, or Gabe Vincent? You probably would have told me, well, Casey's been here for 2 years. He knows this system as well as anyone. Then after Eric spoke, there was a big 3-on-3 game. Apparently, Casey twisted his ankle there, so he became a non-factor. I like Caleb Martin. He's a solid player. He's a good player. You know, one of those players on the scale of 1 to 10, he's a 5. Yeah. 5.5 maybe. That's what he is, God bless him. So it's one thing to have a route like you did in Dallas. But if you're going to need that ninth man, if someone's going to get in foul trouble, if Kyle Lowry's going to sit another game, you could be one player short right now. We spoke about this roster, only went with 14 because of the luxury tax. UD doesn't play except if it's the last minute of the game. Victor Oladipo is still out nursing that quadriceps surgery rehab. And now if Casey's unplayable, you once again are tight because it's not like you're going to play Omer Yurtseven when a wing goes out. He doesn't fit. And Dwayne Dedmon has been great for his role. I'm not saying he's a great center or an all-star. I'm saying he has been great as a 12 to 14-minute player also. So Omer isn't as necessary right there. So I'm still a little concerned about the Strus fallout. They survived 1 game, but we're talking at least 2 weeks. Can they survive 10 games?
And I think it's, if you're mentioning Martin and Gabe Vincent, they bring different things to the table. And I think with Gabe, you're going to get more of that scoring element, especially when he's hot. I mean, you're going to, and if you're trying to replace the scoring that Strus brought, you're going to have that. Both guys are good defenders. Caleb Martin is more of your, like, I love the mentality that he's brought where, man, he is going to be in your face. And hey, Gabe Vincent can do the same sort of thing. But with Martin, like the first time you saw him, and I actually think James Borrego mentioned this, that he's going to fit perfectly with what Miami does.
Another fit, another right guy. Him and his brother and Cody Martin also, almost the same player. We were joking. They swapped. Michael Lissack, the Heat PR guy, was talking to us when they swapped jerseys after that Charlotte game on Friday. He said he couldn't tell the difference. He said, literally, if they would have swapped locker rooms and Cody got on the plane with the Heat, you wouldn't have known. That's how much they both are twins in appearance and twins in style also. Again, he's limited to 50 total appearances on the active roster, not in games, on the active roster. So the Heat will have to find 32 games to go without him. Hopefully Max Strus comes back. You can make him inactive a few more. You could transfer his contract, make him a standard roster player before the playoffs, which I think they will do. So you have that option also. But again, a little bit of eggshells with Max Strus being out.
So we got a lot to get to in this last segment of the show. I want to show you guys the jerseys if you haven't seen them yet. The jerseys are going to be wearing starting tonight. Plus, we want to talk about Victor Oladipo and how he could potentially fit in with this role. And then, Ira, we got a great question in the chat, and I want to get your take on this. So I'll give you the commercial break to marinate on this. Is this a team that is worth now going into the tax for? We'll get to that and a lot more coming up right here on Inside the Paint.
You're listening to the Pallet Rack City Inside the Paint Show. Pallet Rack City in Hialeah is the company you need when you want your warehouse sporting the finest racks in the business. After all, who doesn't love a good rack? Pallet Rack City. When you need your warehouse looking good while staying efficient, there's only one place to find the finest racks in the business. Pallet Rack City in Hialeah. 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547. Pallet Rack City is the company you need when you want your warehouse sporting the finest racks in the business. After all, who doesn't love a great rack? Pallet Rack City. 305-424-8547. That's 305-424-8547.
Folks, you can support the hardest working sports talk show in South Florida through Cash App or Venmo. Just search Cash Big O Show. Support us through Cash App or Venmo. Cash Big O Show. We thank you for your incredible support. For over 16 years, EJDconstruction.com has provided South Florida residents quality craftsmanship, accurate project management, and exceptional service. That's why EJDconstruction.com is an A-rated member of Angie's List and the Better Business Bureau. When you're looking for the right custom home builder for additions or home remodeling, please call my friend Eric at 305-433-4843. That's 305-433-4843 for EJDconstruction.com.
If you're a Miami sports fan, then there's only one store to go to, and that's Caneswear at Miami Fanwear in Davie. They're your one-stop shop for all your Inter Miami CF, Canes, Dolphins, Panthers, and Marlins merchandise. They have hats, t-shirts, game day jerseys, and so much more. Located at 2511 South University Drive in Davie, and open 24/7 online at caneswear.com or intermiamiwear.com. Call them at 954-835-5597. Caneswear, the spot where Inter Miami and all Miami sports fans shop.
When you're ready to purchase a new home loan or refinance the one you have, American Dream Lending will make sure your loan experience is easy with fast approvals and quick closings. With many loan programs and competitive rates, now is the time to turn your dreams into reality. Ask about special financing for veterans. They never charge an application fee, and you will work directly with one of their experienced loan professionals. Stop dreaming and contact American Dream Lending today. 786-802-1727 or online at adreamlending.com. If it's hardcore hoops you desire, make sure you subscribe to the Big O Radio Show and never miss an episode of Inside the Paint. Let's get back to the Pallet Rack City Inside the Paint Show with Ira Winderman and Clay Ferraro.
Welcome back, Ira. So had some good questions before the break, and the one that I wanted to get to right off the top here, is this a team, based on what you've seen so far, that you, Ira Winderman, using Mickey Arison's money, would be happy going into the tax for?
Well, there's the short view and the long view. Short view, of course, and they can do it. And right now, with a Max Strus being out, I like James Ennis. I think he can come in, he can fill that role, he can defend, he can make shots. He spent enough time in the Heat system. He was a Heat second-round acquisition of theirs before he played 1 year in Australia, that he might at least know some of what Eric Spoelstra wants to do. I could see an argument made for Wesley Matthews. I know he's a little older, but that fits the Heat demographic. He can make three-pointers with the second unit. But the question is sustainability. If you go into the tax, you get closer to the repeater tax. You're looking at a 3-year run minimum with Kyle Lowry on his 3-year contract, longer with Jimmy Butler on his extension. So do you have to protect the future as well? Do you have to say it's not just about this season with those guys, but we don't want to get to a point where even a minimum salary guy becomes 3, 4, 5 times that? So I get it. I think you slow play it. You say it ain't broke now. You're still winning anyway. Now, if you show a wart where all of a sudden you realize Caleb Martin isn't enough, where all of a sudden you find out that a player X has to go into pandemic protocols for 10 days and you're without someone, then you can. Remember, Clay, you can sign a player right now to a non-guaranteed contract, play him for X amount of games, and then cut him. Use some of that $400,000 you have left under the tax to do something, or you could trade KZ Okpala with some cash and lose that salary and gain more flexibility. I would like to see one more, unless, and you've teased this in the first 2 segments, unless KZ Okpala is closer than we think. Now, if KZ Okpala is 3, 4, 5, 6, even only 8 weeks away, and you have a real sense that he's coming back sooner, then I think you can wait. So I think a lot of this has to do.
Sorry, not to cut you off. Do you mean Okpala or Oladipo?
No, Oladipo. I'm sorry. It's the old names. Yes, I was wondering why you're giving me that gaze look. Yes, Victor Oladipo. I'm sorry. I was caught in the O's there for a while, in the O zone. If Victor Oladipo is coming back, then you answer that question. What a perfect guy to step in for Max Strus. What a perfect guy to round out this roster anyway. So what we don't know is what they know. We're going to hear the same thing. You know this. We spoke about this on our first show this year. Eric Spoelstra will always say no new update until there is the update, and you wait on that. So I think really going into the tax and spending the money comes down to more, when is Victor Oladipo coming back? And even if it's as late as midseason and in January, I think you could pull it off and you could wait for that. If, however, they're going, this guy's looking to get right and he might not come back at all this season, then I think you have to think about it. So I think, not KZ Okpala, sorry, Victor Oladipo is really the swing player when it comes, number one, to the roster, number two, to the luxury tax.
Yeah, and so because there was another question, and this kind of gets into what you were saying. The other question was, what's the timetable there? We don't know, and they're not going to tell us, and they're not going to let anything leak out. And so as these next few weeks go on, I'm with you as far as slow playing goes. I would say this: tomorrow isn't promised, and
Right.
I think because you've got the older team, and you've had good fortune to this point with health. You've only had Kyle Lowry missing one game. And hopefully this is one of those seasons where, hey, even though these guys are older, they keep themselves in really, really good shape. Yeah. And so you're able to say, so if you get to that point where you're slow playing it and you're, I don't know, 30 games into the season, 40 games into the season, you look up and you're still in the number one seed. Yeah, I think at that point, and you look at Victor Oladipo coming back, and he's either not what you were hoping for, or he's not quite as healthy as then you start to make that decision, and it becomes a little bit. And to me, Ira, I think it's a no-brainer that if you need someone and you feel like you are one player away with this team, based on what you've seen, you owe it to this group to try to make a run, because you don't know.
I'm going to give you part B of that, though. The buyout deadline is March 1st, after the February 10th trading deadline. Traditionally, good players will play for the minimum for a chance to win a championship. So if you hold your $400,000 under the tax, maybe create a little more space, all of a sudden players like an Eric Gordon, maybe a John Wall, or other players who are completely out of your price range now, as we talk at the beginning of November, are like, damn, they're third in the East. They can win a title. They're in Miami. They have no state income tax. I might be able to go back for another season there. You want to make yourself sexy at the buyout deadline. Last season at the buyout deadline, the Heat were...
By the way, nobody knows more about making themselves sexy than Ira Winderman.
Well, I try, but I have other backdrops for my other shows, for Ira After Dark. So but that's a different story. So when you look at last season, the Heat were...
I don't even want to know, man.
No, you don't want to know. You don't want to know that under the shirt, the Speedo was on, but that's another story for another day.
That's it. I'm out. I'm done.
You're out. Okay, we'll get to the rest of the show here.
Man.
So last year at the buyout deadline, the Heat were a middling team. They were, Clay, you remember, they almost were in the play-in. So when Blake Griffin shook free, he said, why wouldn't I go to the Nets instead? Remember, LaMarcus Aldridge was all but written to the Heat. He was going to get his buyout from the Spurs. He was coming from the Heat. He said it. Everyone thought it. Boom, he went to Brooklyn instead. Again, why? The Heat were a fifth
and look, by the
team.
way, not to interrupt you, but he said flat out, or people close to him said flat out, no, it's because the Heat aren't good enough.
Right. It could be is where he wanted to be until he said, wait, they're in fifth place and Brooklyn's in second place, and that's a better place to be.
And I think they'd just gotten blown out by Brooklyn, too. Like, they'd just gotten blown out by
They were in a rough stretch. So the point I'm making is, if around March 1st you're in a good position, they will come to you. It's like Field of Dreams. They will come through on the court and you'll go, I'll take a John Wall. I think I'll take an Eric Gordon also. And he's a little bit older, but maybe I'll try the Kevin Love over there. So there will be a lot of options for them if they're competitive then. So you might be able to, number one, avoid the tax. Number two, not have to make a big trade at the February 10th deadline. And number three, by March 1st, all of a sudden, you're sort of getting the who's who of who used to be and who might be again.
So to answer the question, I think there is an option A, B, and C. And we always hear that from Pat Riley, the plan A, B, and C. I think the plan A and the preferred plan would be Victor Oladipo comes back, and he looks like 2016, 2017 Victor Oladipo, and that's your guy. He fills all of your voids. The plan B would be what you just said, which is you wait until that buyout deadline. You're playing so well that one of those players shakes free and they're looking at Miami like, yeah, man, absolutely. Sure. And you also sell them on, hey, you can be the missing piece. You can be the guy that gets us the ring that we haven't been able to get. Like Riley, we know, can sell that. Plan C to me, Ira, and again, this is all assuming that you are right there. You're basically feeling like you're one piece away from winning a championship. At that point, to me, you have to seriously consider going into the tax if plans A and B don't look like they're going to materialize.
And that question will be asked, because I asked it to Pat Riley in his preseason. You've said when you are a contender, you and Mickey Harrison have said, we will spend into the tax when we are a contender. So if they are a contender at that point, then everything should be on the table about maximizing this roster. Or, Clay, one other thing. The chemistry can be so good, you don't want to take a chance. You don't want to bring in a player who might have other issues off court, who might have ego things. Even when I look at the Celtics, who are coming in tonight to FTX Arena, and they got Dennis Schroeder for pennies on the dollar because he was all that's left in free agency. I always wonder about players like this, Clay. Are they playing for their team, or are they playing to rebuild their value statistically so they can get another contract? So that's a risk that you bring in a John Wall, who's just taken a buyout, left some money on the table, playing for the minimum. Would he come in and saying, I want to show my value again so I can hit free agency and have value versus the chemistry you have? You know what? It's almost like all these other teams. Every fan, I'm sure you see it on the chat also, wants a trade. They want to be GMs. But sometimes what you have is good enough. Sometimes you can roll with what you have and build that chemistry for months, and that's as good as any other option, maybe your plan D.
Yeah, and like we saw last year with Brooklyn, they added the players, but it wasn't enough because of what happened with James Harden and Kyrie Irving in the playoffs. And so it's a delicate balance where you're trying to figure out, do you not want to disrupt the chemistry, but make sure that you have enough talent going forward? Hey, Sean, if I've got you, can you bring up the jerseys for tonight? You mentioned the Celtics are coming into FTX Arena tonight. Let's take a look at these beauties. Oh, look at that. I like how they kind of took the previous jerseys. Do you remember how many combinations they had? Bam Adebayo did like a math thing. It was like, I think it was like over 20,000 jersey combinations that they can have with the different lettering.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I think it was like 5,200 was the number that I got from the Heat as far as just the numbering. Also, fans, just so people aren't confused, the lettering is standard on every jersey. The M-I-A-M-I, that doesn't change.
See, just so you guys aren't confused, is Ira code for Clay, you're full of crap. Like, you got that wrong. It's not that the lettering no, so it's just the numbering that changes.
So the word Miami, the nameplate will say the same. It's the two numbers. There are like over 5,000 different choices there on the way you can do your numbering. That's why we were talking about like the broadcasters and how it might be a little bit tougher. Bam, if you notice, chose the black and then the trophy gold there, or that might be the 15 strong. Also, there's two options in that. So you can pick from the vice colors. And again, the Heat did something really smart, Clay. In the NBA, when you sell merchandise nationally, whether it's NBAstore.com or other places, you get an equal percentage on your merchandise versus any other team. I think it's basically you get a 1/30th split with the other teams. However, when you sell in your market at your own venues, you get a much higher percentage. The numbering done by the fans can only be done directly through the Heat. In other words, if you were to go to Champs or to Dick's or to any other national outlet, Fanatics, you would wind up getting just whatever numbering they give you. One set style, that's it. It's only through the Miami Heat, their pop-up store that's opening tonight at FTX Arena, and then to heatstore.com, you can choose your numbering, your two numbers. So again, like Michael McCullough said, the Heat's director of marketing, you could have a Bam Adebayo that's a one-of-a-kind, even though it's an Adebayo jersey that other people have also. It's interesting. It's a matter of, does it look too busy? I think they kept the court, if Sean could bring that up, rather simplistic with the way the court looks. So I think the court itself coming out is not going to be wild as the vice versa that they had last season, half the fuchsia and half the other color. I think it's pretty basic. The logo, I think, looks pretty cool. Even the subtle accents, if you notice there around the court, the yellow line is out of bounds. That is their homage to Ray Allen coming out when the yellow ropes were out, thinking the Spurs were going to win the 2013 title.
Wow.
But it's subtle. The three-point line is the Miami, the Vice jerseys, the colors they use there. But it's subtle. The black lane is a throwback to when the Heat first played at Miami Arena. The lane back then, starting in 1988, was painted black. So they did that. But I think it's subtle enough that when you look at it, unlike last year's vice versa court, you go, okay, that's a basketball court. There's still a relative simplicity, which I've always preferred also. One of those vice courts, you didn't even know where the out of bounds was. It's like the end zone sometimes they paint in the NFL. You don't know which line is out of bounds, which is in. So I think there's a complexity to the jersey, but I like that there's simplicity to the court as well.
By the way, Ira, you just did me a big favor because taking people behind the curtain, my story today that I'm working on for Local 10 is Ray Allen was just named the new head basketball coach at Gulliver Prep.
Yeah.
And we got to hear from him last night. So I'm kind of doing a story on what Ray Allen is doing now. I had no idea that the gold on the court was the homage to get those yellow ropes out of here. Get those ropes out of here.
Right, so now let's get that freaking out of bounds line out of here so you have that instead.
That's cool.
So, yeah, it's like, I'm telling you, Michael McCullough and his staff there, you know, they were absolute mad scientists on this. And yes, I even like what he said. Is this over the top? You bet it's over the top. But what's more over the top than South Beach and Miami anyway? I mean, you're not going to see more unique than any other place in the country, so it makes sense to try to be a little different. Interestingly, Clay, there's 30 teams in the NBA. One does their jerseys in-house, the Miami Heat. The other 29 teams have Nike's designer bringing them ideas on what they're going to do. So the Heat has kept this very much South Florida, South Beach, very much of who we are, because they do it all in-house.
And that's why they have the jobs that they do, and you and I are just sitting here talking about it. Let's end the show, Ira, talking about Tyler Hero.
Sure.
And, you know, I feel like it's something we talk about every week because every week he does something else to prove that he's entering that stratosphere of a player that is, you can rely on him. And what I think is so important, and it kind of drives me nuts, Ira, because this national narrative that's kind of spun out of what he said with Jeremy Taché of, I see myself being in the same category as Trae Young and Luka Doncic. At the time, it bothered me because I thought it was taken out of context.
It was, and I spoke to him the next day, and he said, no. What I said is, I want to be in the same conversation. And he clarified that. Again, so many of the national analysts just went with part A because it was sexier. But what he said, and we put this in the Sun Sentinel, I had it several times on sunsentinel.com, is he said, my intention was to say, I want to be that. And Clay, what's wrong with that?
Oh, it drove me nuts.
You want to be Mike Breen. We all want to be someone one day. We all see that there's something better out there. God bless him. I mean, can you imagine if he came in and he said, one day I want to be like the third tier point guard over there. I want to be like that guy. No, he's aiming high. Hey, when he wore that sport coat on draft night, you knew the kid was aiming high anyway.
So let me ask you this. Because I thought it was really interesting that last night he goes out there and he balls out again in Dallas, or 2 nights ago, goes out there and balls out again in Dallas. And Luka's right there. And on Twitter, you're reading all of these people who are, again, taking out of context the quote that he had. But one thing we know about Tyler is that in the face of adversity, in the face of people telling him he's not something, in the face of, he steps up and he proves that he is. And it all started back when he was in Wisconsin and he had committed to the Badgers, decommitted and goes to Kentucky. That's when he played his best. So, Ira, there's a part of me that thinks, yes, it's taken out of context. It's unfair to him. There's another part of me that feels like he's built for this. And if there's anybody built to kind of rise above when this kind of stuff is getting thrown at him, it's him.
Yeah, his swag is being backed up now. I'm not so sure his mid-range shooting is sustainable, so Heat fans don't go in a panic if he has a 4 of 15, because like you and I have spoken for a month now, Clay, what is he? He's a Vinnie Johnson, he's a Jamal Crawford, he's a Lou Williams. All of those players, Tim Hardaway, have had their 1 of 15s. That's part of the deal also. It doesn't mean that they've collapsed or come back to earth. It just means when you're a streak scorer, there's a reason people use the word streak, because it can go both ways. It probably will at some point. Don't panic when it does.
Ooh, that fade on the baseline off the dribble the other night, though, that was a thing of beauty. That was gorgeous. I want to see that stay. All right, Ira, great stuff today. Please make sure to follow Ira on the Sun Sentinel, all of the stuff that you need for tonight's Boston Celtics game. I'll be out there starting at noon on Local 10, actually heading out there shortly. And then we're going to have that piece on Ray Allen, and Will Manso's going to have a lot on tonight's game. So much good stuff to talk about with this Heat team. We're glad that you were able to spend Thursday morning with us. We'll see you again next week.
Thanks, guys.